Welcome to Football Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral, caffeine-loving, bracket-busting, promo-offering weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and the busy off-season that's about to kick up another gear with the start of spring practice. I'm Eric Hansen, fresh from a selection Sunday with the Irish women's basketball team that induced a group golf clap. He's Tyler James doing his Linda Blair impression, head of spinning with all the Notre Dame scholarship offers that went out today on Pot of Gold Day. Together, we're the content creators and rogue rumor destroyers at InsideIndySports.com. On tonight's show, we're going to get you past the knee-jerk and clickbait recruiting mythology and also explain what the hell Pot of Gold Day is and why it's saturating your social media feeds. GM Mike Martin, yeah, he's part of the conversation. So are the people and things to watch for in spring practice. And, of course, your questions. So start filling up the queue. This is...
All right, nicely done there, Eric. Hopefully, I don't look as tired as I feel. But I've been looking at my screen since 7:30 a.m., 8 o'clock a.m. So I'm tired of looking at a computer screen. But we trudge forward because we love our Football Never Sleeps audience so much. We don't have any scholarship offers to hand out, but we do have some gold of our own on Pot of Gold Day in the form of a free subscription to InsideIndySports.com that lasts until summer. Use promo code GOLDDAY25 to sign up through Tuesday. So you got the rest of today and tomorrow to sign up, and you'll get all of our premium recruiting coverage, spring football analysis, and access to the Insider Lounge for free until June 20th. This is the best way to keep up with everything that we don't necessarily get a chance to discuss here and in more depth. So there's a link to sign up in the video description below. Remember, that's code GOLDDAY25. And as always, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you to everyone for tuning in live. We appreciate you guys and getting your questions. Try not to quiz me too hard on as many specific guys who received offers today, but we'll get you covered on what you need to know about Pot of Gold Day, and make sure you don't miss any of our YouTube content moving forward.
Right. And one thing that's, Tyler mentioned, we have the message boards and stuff. We got a really great community. I actually went out to dinner a couple weekends ago with one of our message board contributors and his wife, and we went and had Mexican food and Corona beer with lime, and it was really delicious. And I also want to thank, if Rajon, if you're watching, thanks for the happy face stickers. I'll get them right side up here so that they're not frowny face stickers. And off we go with tonight's show now that I'm done showing off my trophies.
So I think in the future, whenever I'm frowning and not realizing it, I think you just have to hold those stickers up.
That sounds good. He gave me enough that I can give them to all my grandkids and they won't fight over them. So they do love stickers. So, okay. So, our opening drive is Pot of Gold Day and its significance. So what is Pot of Gold Day and why should Notre Dame fans pay attention to it? Tyler, because you've been paying attention to it for at least 12 hours, I think, today.
Yeah, Pot of Gold Day, not to be confused with Pot of Gold Day, which used to be every day when we recorded that podcast back at the South Bend Tribune. But Pot of Gold Day is Notre Dame's celebration of St. Patrick's Day that has turned into a recruiting event that the football program has created to sort of drum up interest in the Irish, and it's when the program unleashes its offers to the sophomore class every year. So this year we're talking about 27 recruits who are receiving offers, and in years past it's been those similar classes. So it matters because a lot of guys that end up in Notre Dame's class will have received offers today. It's increased as the years have gone on. The first player to sign that came from a Pot of Gold Day offer was actually Micah Bell in the 2023 class. Offensive lineman Gerby Lambert, Peter Jones, linebacker Kingston Viliamo Asa, and tight end Jack Larson all signed in the 2024 class after receiving a Pot of Gold Day offers, and then got all the way up to 7 in this 2025 class with Christopher Burgess Jr., Dominic Kulak, linebackers Madden Framo and Anthony Saka, tight end James Flanagan, cornerback Creed Thomas, and wide receiver Jerome Bettis Jr. And then right now, Notre Dame has 7 2026 commits. 5 of them were pot of gold day offers: offensive lineman Tyler Merrill and Ben Nichols, cornerback Chasten Smith, linebacker Thomas Davis Jr., and wide receiver Dylan Faison. So there's a lot of names to go through today, but some of these names will be names that you'll need to know about in the future, and will be wearing a Notre Dame uniform and a gold helmet a few years down the road.
Okay, so let's boil it down, since I couldn't even keep up with all the retweets that I was supposed to do today. I just try to get the ones that I thought were significant. So 2 things: total number of offers that you counted, and then who are the big names that these people should know about.
Yeah, I took a break about an hour ago to make sure I knew what we wanted to talk about on the show tonight. And then I saw one that happened. So they're up to at least 90 that I've counted. And Notre Dame started the day with fewer than 10 offers. So they're getting close to 100 in the 2027 class. And obviously close to 90% of those, or more than 90% of those, being from today. So a lot to process. We have a thread over on the Insider Lounge that has all of the offers listed in there, some information about those guys, where Rivals ranks or rates them, and some of the other offers that they have, and if there's anything else notable about them as it relates to Notre Dame. To give you a thumbnail, 9 of the top 25 recruits in the 2027 class received offers from Notre Dame today. A lot of defensive linemen: KJ Green, a defensive end; defensive tackle Ben Jarvis Shoemaker; defensive end Ricardo Kitchen, who's from Muskegon, Michigan; defensive end Caden Henderson; defensive end Cameron Pritchett. So positions that Notre Dame fans are interested in. So wide receivers as well: Trenton Yancey, Julius Jones, who, that if that name is familiar, you are correct. We'll get into that here in a second. And Brock Williams, the tight end out of Illinois, he's the number 25 overall prospect in the 2027 class. So those are guys that are interesting names to know, just in terms of the talent. And there's some more names to know that are familiar. I thought it was interesting that Notre Dame offered Penn State running back commit Kimon Spell, who was recruited by Jaywan Sider, Notre Dame's new running backs coach, while he was at Penn State. He's a Pennsylvania kid who's ranked as the number 5 running back and number 74 overall in the 2027 class. So there's a lot of talent, a lot of really impressive kids that got offers today. Some of the familiar names I mentioned: Julius Jones. Yes, he's the son of former Notre Dame running back Julius Jones. He's ranked as the number 1 slot and number 10 overall in the 2027 class. He's just 5'11", 160, at least according to our Rivals database, which is why he's listed as a slot receiver rather than an outside receiver, but a very talented playmaker at St. Thomas Aquinas down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Richie Flanagan, son of former Notre Dame defensive lineman Jim Flanagan and younger brother of tight end signee James Flanagan. He has yet to receive a rating or ranking from Rivals, and Notre Dame is his 4th offer after Duke, Illinois, and Wisconsin. And then another defensive tackle, and I'll butcher this name, I'm sure, Alifileti Tuihalamaka is the younger brother of Junior Tuihalamaka, Notre Dame defensive end. I don't know if, like Junior, Alifileti has a much easier pronounced nickname that he can go by, but he's the number 14 defensive tackle and number 230 overall in the 2027 class, 6'4", 260-pounder out of Oaks Christian in California. So those are some of the names that I just wanted to highlight for you guys. Like I mentioned, we have a thread on the Insider Lounge where we have information about all these guys. Our national Rival staff has been reaching out to these guys for quotes. So there's quotes from a lot of these guys. Some are planning to be on campus here even just later this week or before spring football ends. So a lot to sort of uncover, unravel, and process from a very busy day for Notre Dame recruiting.
Okay, I got a very important question. Did you mention Chris Zorch's godson in that?
I did not, and that I believe is Braden Parks.
Yes, it is Braden Parks.
Okay. Yeah. There was a number of Chicago area kids, so I was afraid that I was going to mix up which Chicago area kid it was. But yeah, Braden Parks is from Brother Rice High School. He's a defensive tackle. Visited Notre Dame.
He's not Bone Crusher though, right?
That's not Bone Crusher. No, okay. That Bone Crusher is a 2028 recruit.
Okay.
He's even younger, and he's at Mount Carmel.
Okay.
But Braden Parks is someone who's been in Notre Dame before for a visit, like Chris Zorich mentioned on social media. It's his godson. Plans to be at Notre Dame again this spring. So someone obviously to be tracking. He's in the Rivals 250, I believe. I don't have his ranking offhand, but a highly thought of defensive tackle out of Chicago, and obviously with the Chris Zorich connection, you hope that means good things for Notre Dame moving forward.
Okay, well, you mentioned how long Notre Dame's been doing this. Was there anything unique about this version of it? Was there anything that you thought, oh, wow, they amped it up this year?
I don't think there's anything significantly different. I mean, the number of offers is very high. I need to go back and check to see. This might be the most they've sent out in for any of those pot of gold days. But it's pretty much the same concept. Like, it's just, hey, this is St. Patrick's Day. It's also pot of gold day. We want you to think about Notre Dame today, and sort of kick off your official recruitment from us. Even though a lot of these guys have been in contact with Notre Dame previously, the branding that they went with this year was sort of like trading cards. The coaching staff was tweeting out former Notre Dame players who made it to the pros, and some of the trading cards that the graphics staff mocked up. So just highlighting the NFL legacy and lineage that Notre Dame's football program has. And yeah, I mean, I think this is now the 5th year. Notre Dame started in 2021, and it's a pretty impressive show of like, hey, we're owning this day. And we want to make sure that everyone's thinking about Notre Dame football today.
Okay. What do you like about the concept? What do you not like? Like, do they wait too long for some of these guys to get offers out, for example? And then do you really think it makes the impact that's intended? So that's about 8 questions rolled into 2.
Yeah, I think I like it because like there aren't a lot of ways that you can just sort of like own a day on the recruiting calendar. And this is without even bringing them on campus. Like, this is like, it's just an obvious connection with St. Patrick's Day being an Irish linked holiday that you think about Notre Dame football on that day. The in terms of, is it too late to offer? I don't think so. Like, you'll see a lot of these guys, some of them are 30, close to 40 offers already. Some of them, like I mentioned, Richie Flanagan, I think that was Notre Dame was his 4th offer. But the offer is somewhat like nebulous. Like, a lot of these guys knew that this was coming. Like, they weren't surprised. Not all of these guys didn't wake up today not knowing that they were going to get an offer from Notre Dame. And as long as you communicate like where you're at with the kid and make sure that you're contacting, well, they have to contact you. You have to follow the rules that are allowed. But as long as you're communicating with them and making sure that they know that you're interested in them, this is the process that Notre Dame goes through. You can sort of give them an understanding like, hey, we value a lot. Our offers come out on St. Patrick's Day, and you should be expecting to hear from us. And then that's the interest. I mean, you don't have to have an offer to come visit Notre Dame. Like, some kids will sort of treat it that way. Like, I'm not going to spend my time or money to go visit somewhere until I have an offer. But if they have this understanding that this is how Notre Dame does it, they can still get out to Notre Dame, see a game this past season, even though they're sophomores. So, I mean, these are young kids. I know the recruiting processes continue to speed up more and more, but there's a long time between now and when these guys will be signing to their eventual colleges. So I don't think it's too late. And I mean, I don't think that like the top recruiting teams in the country don't lose guys because they didn't offer them as freshmen. I think they end up winning out because of what they offer them long term, not when they offered them.
That's interesting because I know that there's some people that are Notre Dame's not offering enough early. So that's an interesting thing. Okay, the last question I want to get to before we get to our question portal questions from our viewers. Does this have the potential to change the way Notre Dame's current state of recruiting is being perceived? Or is that perception more about the 2026 class and what's happening with those guys?
I don't think so. I mean, you
don't think it has the potential to change, not the last part of my question.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
You're doing good at layering questions in there. And so, and I'm doing bad at making it clear which one I'm answering.
I'm still better. There's somebody that really layers questions at the Notre Dame press conferences, and I'm doing better than that.
I think it's just, I mean, I think there's 2026 recruits that are thinking about Notre Dame today because of what they're seeing and getting reminded, oh yeah, this is when I received my offer from Notre Dame a year ago. So I don't know that it's necessarily generating anything that's going to turn into like, okay, now Notre Dame's going to get a bunch of 2026 commitments. And that's what you're going to be measured by, right? Like a scholarship offer is sort of the starting point and the bare minimum in terms of recruiting. There's a lot more that goes into it. So it just gets the buzz going in the 2027 class. I think it gives the 2026 class a reminder of, hey, this is what we're selling at Notre Dame. I think for people who are like, what's Notre Dame doing in the big picture with recruiting, albeit while sitting with the number 7th ranked class in 2026, they're going to want to see commitments, which is understandable. And that's not necessarily what this day is about.
Okay. Are we ready for our run through for questions?
Yeah, I have not processed them very well, so give me a second to read them. I've just been starring them, and then I'll throw them out there.
Okay, and I'll compliment Jeff Stevens for saying that we should have a Guinness. I told him that I would take one.
I have some in my fridge. I need to partake before the evening ends.
I have Corona in my fridge. That Corona with the lime the other night I put it in there, and I had one of those this weekend. Actually, yeah, just one.
If you had to think about it, then maybe it wasn't just one. But Jeff Stevens says it appears no quarterback offers for the 2027 class. Correct, and that is correct. Notre Dame has not yet settled on which way it wants to push for 2027 recruits at the quarterback position. Now, we were talking about earlier, is Notre Dame waiting too long? I think you could, if you're going to argue about a specific position that you need to have your offers by this point, I think I could believe you as it relates to quarterbacks. Like Notre Dame needs to come together with its quarterback plan for the 2027 class, and make sure it gets who it wants and not fall too far behind with that. I mean, there's one kid out of Illinois, Trey Taylor, who's one of the top ranked quarterbacks in the country, interested in Notre Dame. He's planning to visit Notre Dame, I believe, this week, and he intends to make his decision, I think, by June or something like that. And he doesn't know if he doesn't have an offer from Notre Dame yet. And so that leaves, and he's been in Notre Dame a number of times. So I don't know that he would need a ton more to know a lot more about Notre Dame between now and then. But if he doesn't know if he's going to have an offer, he can't consider Notre Dame too heavily. So that was the choice that Notre Dame made in terms of what it's doing at quarterback. A lot of those 2027 quarterbacks are planning to be on campus during the spring for Notre Dame, and maybe that gives Notre Dame the opportunity to sort of rubber stamp an offer and see them in person and be like, okay, yes, now once you get to campus, then we're going to offer you. And so we'll see how that all plays out. But yeah, no 2027 quarterback offers. There are offers at all the other positions, non-special teams wise, but no quarterbacks.
What's the upside of waiting, delaying that? Because you said that's the one position you think you could justify earlier offers. So what could Notre Dame be gaining by, let's see these guys on the hoof? Or, I mean, are they trying to get a character? I mean, are they trying to avoid the Deuce Knight syndrome where somebody kind of uses them as a placeholder or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it could be that. I think whenever you offer someone early, you run the risk of them wanting to commit. Like and I know it sounds weird to talk about it like that, because I mean, in reality, when you're offering someone, you want them to commit, but you're offering way more than you can actually take in terms.
That's what happened when you offered me to be with your partner.
Yeah,
business partner.
I was like, oh shoot, I guess I'm really stuck with Eric. I shouldn't have put the offer out there. So I mean, Notre Dame wants to make sure it knows who it wants to go after, and I just don't know that it has that answer yet. Should it? I think you could argue for yes. But we're talking about guys that have only played through their sophomore years of high school. So do you know what they're going to look like in the next 2 seasons? And then that's just a long time away. But that is the way the game is going. And this time last year, Notre Dame was offering guys. I mean, Noah Grubbs in the 2026 class received an offer in the summer, so he was ahead of those guys. But or no, I guess that would have been behind those guys. I'm confusing myself. But so yeah, I mean, I don't know.
They had the Brady's going on when there were several guys that they really, really liked, right, including Noah.
And Noah committed last summer. He received his offer, I think, maybe the summer before.
Yeah.
So he was an early offer. Yeah, Notre Dame had 2026 offers out at this time last year, but they haven't done it for a 2027 class. I don't have a good reason for why, but yeah, the only thing I would say is just like you have to be careful about offering quarterbacks, especially when you can only take one. And if you're not certain who you want to take, then you're telling 10 guys like, hey, we don't want you yet. So what's the point of offering them yet if you're telling them we don't want you yet? So I think that's the catch-22 of the quarterback offer situation.
Okay.
All right. Scott Fegan says, guys, what are you looking at most in the spring practices and games other than injuries?
Okay. We're going to talk about spring football in depth a little bit more later, but why don't we give you a little bit of a thumbnail since Tyler pulled up your question out of the portal. So for me in spring practice, the things that I'm going to look at the most, it really varies by position, Scott. Because we're only going to have, other than the blue gold game, we're only going to have one full practice. I think we're going to get the Jersey scrimmage, which is pretty much the most telling practice that we'll see, way more than the blue gold game, because we get to see the non-vanilla parts of the schemes and so forth. Don't you remember that from last year, Tyler, when we saw CJ Carr and we were all going, ooh, and there was a lot in that. I think in general, in the short practice windows, I'm looking for the speed of the wide receivers and the defensive backs because we don't see a lot of contact. When there are contact periods that we get to see, I like to see how the linebackers and defensive backs move. You're still not always taking people to the ground. I think I like to see where the offensive linemen line up and who's first and second string. But, I mean, there's not a lot of true reps that we see that are going to be telling for us. Sometimes you can spot some problems or what needs to be fixed, but it's hard to tell, oh my gosh, they're going to give up 60 sacks this season versus 12, just because I don't think it lends itself to those kind of things. And as far as the quarterbacks, I mean, you do in those later spring practices, that Jersey scrimmage, I thought was very illuminating about a lot of things, including, I mean, that was the first time I went, oh, I get it with CJ Carr. I walked out of there going, oh boy, this guy might be really, really good.
Yeah.
So that's all over the place, but yeah, that's because you can't see everything you want to see. If we could see every practice, if we could see full practices, my list would be different.
Right. I think the physical differences in guys are something you can see, especially with guys that you weren't tracking the season before, guys that weren't playing a lot, whether for injury or for coaches' decision reasons. I like to track some of the guys. I feel like spring is a time where it's like, oh yeah, that guy, like maybe there seems to always be a few older guys that it's like, okay, it's actually clicking for this guy now. To think of like bigger examples, like there were years where the linebackers is like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen here, and all of a sudden Tavon Coney looks awesome. or all of a sudden another
Jason Anye 1 year. It wasn't last year; it was the year before. We're like, he's even on the team still.
Right.
He's might be pretty good.
Yeah, and I think last spring Micah Gilbert looked really good. I think that's changing the topic in terms of like being an older guy, but a younger guy. It's like his time isn't now, but like he's someone to watch in the future. He's sort of more ready made than maybe you expected, and he can compete long term to be someone that's important for Notre Dame's wide receiver position. So it's a combination of like first impressions. Especially with the transfer portal guys, like first chance to see what those guys look like, how they fit in at Notre Dame. So it's more about like catching up on guys or learning about guys that you don't know a lot about, and less about, okay, how much is Anthony Knapp improving, or got like in terms of guys that are returning starters. It's more about who's sort of next. And it's small glimpses, and we get smaller and smaller glimpses seemingly. So it's hard to know exactly what to make of it, but it's just some extra information to prepare us for what's going to happen moving forward. All right. Scott, more recruiting related questions. Scott Fegan says, can Indy get Chicago and Illinois back in the fold? There are some good ones out there.
You know, I talked to Tom Lemming about this a lot, and I know that he's bullish on those guys from Chicago. He goes all over the country, but I think he feels like Chicago hasn't been as appreciated as it should be. I do know that there is a lot of talent in Chicago coming up in these classes, and I do think that Notre Dame is paying attention to it. And you look at this last group that came in, I mean, 3 of the defensive ends are from Chicago.
Yeah.
But I think Notre Dame is doing a much better job of getting immersed in Chicago and trying to get first pick of those guys, because while Texas and Florida and California and Georgia are the big talent producing states, there's still a lot of good talent in Chicago, and it's only 90 miles away. Those kids can get to campus pretty easily, and I think there's less of it, culture shock of snow and that kind of stuff when they're here in bad weather.
Yeah, I think too often when people talk about Chicago as of late, they just sort of overlook what happened in the last class. Like Christopher Burgess counts. Like you can't, like, he's a top 30, 40 recruit. I think 40, because 30 would make him a 5-star. He's not a 5-star.
He was close though. Yeah.
He very highly ranked. Joseph Reif and Dominic Hulak are both 4-star recruits according to Rivals. So I mean, those are impressive players. I mean, you might have different opinions about Hulak or Reif or Burgess, but those count. Like Justin Scott isn't the only person that matters of ever coming out of Chicago. I think people like are still lingering from that, and then just like don't want to be happy about the things that happened since then. So that doesn't mean Notre Dame doesn't have more room to improve. Like there's other guys. If you look at the offer list, there's a lot of offers out there. Notre Dame hasn't always won them. Taylor in the last class, a receiver that went to Georgia, was a sort of disappointing recruiting loss for Notre Dame.
Did he even play for Georgia this last year?
Well, no, he just signed. He's
okay, gotcha.
He'll be a freshman in the fall.
Okay. Good thing he didn't jump the gun.
And the 2026 class, there's a quarterback who's committed to USC out of the Chicago area. Notre Dame already has its quarterback, so that Notre Dame wanted Noah Grubbs, and they got Noah Grubbs. Braden Jones is a defensive end who's committed to USC out of Chicago. He's out at Mount Carmel. That's someone that let's see if he signs at USC. Everything is indicating that he will, but these are the type of recruits that Notre Dame struggles to keep. Maybe it gets an early recruitment from, but ends up losing out to a regional school. Why can't Notre Dame do that with guys out of Chicago? Can't they flip some recruitments? Let's see if that happens. And let's see if they can continue that momentum in these 2026 and 27 classes. I just think we have to give Notre Dame credit for some of what it has done, and not just blame it for what it hasn't done.
Okay. Who's next?
Jeff Stevens says, when it comes time to hit the recruiting road, do you think GM Mike Martin will do so for some top prospects? Who do you think would travel with him?
I'm going to let you take that question because you're the Mike Martin expert. I would say I don't know if he can. Can he? I mean, they've opened that up on who can go on the road and who can't. But you know the particulars better because these GM positions didn't exist until now.
Well, I mean, Chad Bowden was able to get out.
He was, but not early in his career. Remember, that kind of came right after COVID that they started letting the non-assistant coaches go out. But I think you're only allowed to have so many people out at a time. But let me stop babbling because I'm talking about what I don't know.
Yeah. You're only allowed to have a certain amount, but you can sub in guys that aren't coaches. There's like something you have to pass in order to do it. Like you have to know, like maybe like acknowledge the rules and prove that you know the rules or something.
Right. It is. There's a compliance test.
And so, I mean, in January, while Notre Dame was playing in the playoffs still, it sent out a bunch of off the field people in the recruiting department to these high schools. I don't know if Mike Martin will do that. I would imagine in situations like that. I think something that Notre Dame did with Chad Bowden was he a lot of times like was there in place of one of the coordinators, or maybe someone that's maybe not recruiting as strong, or maybe he's going somewhere where he has good relationships with people, and it would be more impactful to have him there. Now, Mike Martin doesn't have that yet because he doesn't know these people. But especially if there's guys that you want to get him in front of that aren't here to meet him, then that would be a way you can sort of counteract that. The amount of contact you can actually have with the kids in person is limited depending on which class they're in terms of their high school class. So, and I would imagine there would take someone that has relationships with those kids with him. So I don't know if like say he's
their future position coach.
Yeah, or it could be if we're talking about like a January situation where the coaching staff is still busy, it could be like Carter Allman or someone else in the recruiting office that has relationships with the player and or coaches and stuff like that. So there's a number of different ways that they could use Mike Martin as it relates to getting in front of kids.
I think Mike Martin is super personable. I was impressed with his personality. Now I have a grandson that's the age of these kids that are getting pot of gold offers today, and I don't think he got one. So I'm not in that age group. Maybe Chad Bowden relates better than Mike Martin, but I thought Mike Martin was very personable. I'd roll him out.
Yeah, sorry, just a second. Answering something.
Okay.
All right. Did you ask me a question? I apologize.
No, we're ready for the next question. And tell Haley you want meatloaf for dinner, and we'll see if it's better than the one I cooked this weekend.
No.
We've got rave reviews.
I was receiving a message from a national analyst about someone it seems to be making up offers today. So,
okay.
And wanted to make sure that we're not supporting his pretend.
Hopefully it was not my grandson.
No, well, I would know who that was. I'd be like, no, I'm not sure about that one.
One of my grandchildren said that they loved you, so you know who that was. Yes,
I do. We haven't had an update on if that love still exists, but it was a great Saturday at the South Bend Tribune Sports Department. Let's see. Scott Fegan asked, do you think Notre Dame needs to show a strong passing game before we see the better wide receivers commit? I guess I would be a little gun shy if ND didn't show a strong passing game.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Notre Dame doesn't have a lot to sell in terms of recent success with wide receivers. Even when you talk about, Bo Collins is at the NFL Combine, but I don't know that he's even going to get drafted. And so Notre Dame is sort of behind the eight ball in terms of what they're doing with their offense, in terms of, hey, this is what I want to do at the college level. But I mean, if you play it right, you're like, yeah, you're right. We haven't had that lately, but you can be the guy that can be that for us, and we believe that you can. So I mean, that's the game of recruiting. It's if you've done it so well in the past, you say, hey, look at what we've done before. If you haven't done it well in the past, hey, you're the guy that can make us what we want to be. And that's Notre Dame isn't doing a good enough job of that, in my opinion. I don't think the 2025 class was good enough at the wide receiver position. And Notre Dame needs to make up some ground with the 2026 guys. I did a story recently on 5 guys I think could be answers for Notre Dame in the 2026 class, who are receivers for them, which are 4 stars. So check that out if you're a subscriber to us over at InsideNDSports.com, because there are still good receivers out there, even though Notre Dame has lost out on some early commitments elsewhere.
Was Braden Robinson one of the guys on that list?
Yes.
Okay, so Braden happened to be a guy. Tyler's way more in the weeds in the recruiting than I am, but he had a day off, and I did a visit recap with Braden. And really interesting kid from Texas, really fast, and really mature. But he told me that Mike Denbrock showed him kind of 2 sets of film. He said, here's our 2024 offense. You've seen some of this on TV. And he was impressed with that. And then he said, here's the 2023 LSU offense. He goes, this is the direction we're going. So that's one of the, for lack of a better word, ploys that Mike Denbrock is using is, this is where we want to get to. This is what it's going to look like when we get players like you in it. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
All right. Scott and Jeff are really carrying the question segment today. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Scott asks, how do you feel ND is doing in the current recruiting cycle?
I think we need to get to this question. So you go first, because I'm going to copy off of your paper probably.
Yeah, I think it's like big picture, it's okay. Like Notre Dame is 7th in the country right now, has 7 commits.
Which is ahead of Ohio State and Georgia, right? I think they're in the teens.
I think so. I know Ohio State at least got another commitment somewhat recently. But it's early. Notre Dame is not in the same spot it has been in previous classes. And I sort of went on a rant about this on our show last week, I think, that
you need to keep track of your rants.
There's a lot of time left for Notre Dame to get where it wants to be. So if there's not one path to success or one map that you have to follow in terms of getting the class you want. I think Notre Dame will have a hard time getting, say, a top 5 class. That's going to continue to be elusive to Notre Dame to be able to recruit at that level. I think Notre Dame can recruit and finish with a better recruiting class in this cycle than it did in the last cycle. And that it needs to do, in particular, a better job at defensive tackle and wide receiver, because those are significant positions of need for Notre Dame for the future. And there are some talented players at those positions that Notre Dame has had long time relationships with. The recent losses of guys, whether it's to USC or Clemson or elsewhere, have not been good news. But there are other guys out there that Notre Dame can get that are as talented or even more talented. And we'll see how it goes. Like I just think like Notre Dame needs to get to a point where it shouldn't matter where Notre Dame's recruiting class is in March of this year when you guys sign in December. If Notre Dame is going to become an elite recruiter and among the elites in recruiting, you have to finish with those big guys. Like that's why getting Matt and Freeman was great, because Notre Dame doesn't do that a lot at the end of recruiting cycles. And that's when a lot of these big time guys can flip or flop or make their decisions late in the process because everyone wants them and they're going to hold out to the very end. Now, I know that can sometimes fly in the face of, well, Notre Dame wants and believes that guys know that they belong at Notre Dame, and it shouldn't take them to the end, or it shouldn't come down to a bidding war at the end. But if that's what you want to be, like, you can't fill up your class now, because then you're going to have to lose guys. And I mean, look what Notre Dame had to do at the running back position last class. They ended up getting rid of a couple running backs because those guys weren't good enough, and that's why they felt like they had to move on. And that's not something that is good to do in the recruiting process. They offered a kid today, Amari Irvin, who's the younger brother of Cedric Irvin Jr., who Notre Dame processed out of its recruiting class at the running back position a couple years ago.
Well, they can blame Chad for that.
It's like, well, how do you like, is Notre Dame going to really have a legit chance with his younger brother after what happened to his older brher? I don't know. He's a talented kid. I think he might be a top 100 recruit in the 2027 class. So I don't think it's time to panic. I think Notre Dame has to pick it up. But I think there's reasons, and understandable reasons, of why this isn't just some sort of one fluid process after you play for a national championship game and you lose your general manager to USC.
Okay, here's my take. And Tyler's way more invested in but I'm also invested in, like, let's not get the bedwetting going until after April, May, June. I think those are really, April and June especially, are really key indicators for Notre Dame, with all the unofficial visits in April, with all the official visits in June. I think we're going to have a much clearer picture. And I just get tired of both the over euphoria and the over disappointment of some of the stuff that goes on before those months. But let me give you where some of these teams stand. We mentioned Notre Dame is 7th. And then we have Ohio State at 16th. We have Georgia at 13th. Then we go all the way down to Texas, who played in the college football playoff. Texas is sitting at 31. Alabama is sitting at 37. Michigan is sitting at 42. And you know who's ahead of those three? Who's sitting at 27 and 28? Rutgers and Sacramento State. So I think, again, some of it this early, it's like, you know, throwing away your betting slip or whatever. I don't bet sports betting, so I don't even know if there is such a thing as a betting slip. But throwing away whatever your thing is, throwing away your lottery ticket when there are only 2 numbers have been read and they're both right numbers, or, you know, it's the first quarter and you go, I'm going to lose this. I like what Notre Dame is doing. I do agree with Tyler. There's a lot of work to be done and a lot of hard work to be done. But I like Mike Martin, and I know we're going to get into Mike Martin here in a little bit. So I don't know if we're still in our question stage. I'm going to stop rambling.
All right. Let's try to rapid fire some of these, because I think they're rather short. Scott asked,
okay,
do you see Notre Dame offering kickers or punters going forward, or will those be portal positions? I think they'll mostly be portal positions unless they feel the need to get those guys as freshmen, like they did with Eric Schmidt. I think there will be outliers that are offers more than, or that are high school offers rather than routine high school offers.
Right. I think they learned from some injury situations. Let's get one of these guys that we can develop and have a plan B for.
All right. Actually, let me do this one first. Outbound says, any word on blue gold ticket prices this year? I believe blue gold game prices are $10 and are available online. And I think that has been the case since February 3rd. So outbound, quick Google search will get that for you. Scott Fegan says, is there any chance of picking up another interior defensive line this spring from the portal or tight end?
You certainly could. There will be new inventory, so to speak. I don't know why you would want another defensive lineman unless there's just such a disappointment. You have 12 of them. I don't know. That's a big percentage of your roster. I don't know from a number standpoint that you'd need more than that. And I think there's going to be good enough quality. Tight end, maybe, because you have a more precarious situation in there. And how Kevin Bauman and Jack Larson perform, and even Eli Rared to some extent, the 3 healthy guys, I think is going to tell them whether that's a need or not.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance, but yeah, it's going to depend on how they feel about their roster this spring, and then who's in the portal. Scott, again, who can Notre Dame not lose out on offense and defense in order to make the playoffs? Is that
Jeremiah Love, I'll say, is the best player on offense, so I'll say him. Although I think they have lots of good running backs. I haven't really thought about this. Well, I'm stalling for time here. I don't think they want to lose Leonard Moore. I think that would be a really difficult one to lose. Going back on offense, I'll probably say Malachi Fields. If I think he's going to be their best receiver. It's hard to say that about a guy that won't be on campus until June. I think if they lost a quarterback, as long as they don't lose a bunch of people through the portal or even one of them, if all four of them were on the roster. But if you lose guys to the portal, then your number 2 quarterback, it may be a drop off. But I mean, Jeremiah Love's the best player on offense.
Yeah, I think in reality, there's not usually an answer to this. Like it's not just a one player sort of situation unless your best player.
It didn't do it to him last year. I mean, and they lost some really good players last year.
Unless your best player is so much better than everyone else at that position. So I mean, when I think about who does that fit on the offense, I would maybe say Eli Raridan. Like what Notre Dame could be in real trouble if it doesn't have Eli Raridan next season at the tight end position. Now, obviously, you can work around that, but I just think the tight end position would be extremely thin without Eli Raridan. Defensively, I think Leonard Moore's a good pick, although just leave it to Mike Mickens to find another freshman to be a stud.
That was golden.
I think Adon Schuler would be someone that would be a big loss as the experienced safety. They're going to be plugging in a new person next to him. If they didn't have him, having 2 new safeties back there, I think would not be ideal. So maybe I'll go with Schuler as my pick there.
Their depth is so good at so many positions. Like you could pick Drake Bowen, but then I think they would adjust with KVA playing middle linebacker full time. I'd hate to lose Drake Bowen, but if I'm Marcus Freeman, but gosh, they're really doing a good job of building quality depth.
All right. I think that exhausts our questions.
Okay. Well, I'm exhausted because they were all so good. Okay. More recruiting reset. So what's next here in the recruiting process, Tyler? What should be people on the lookout for? Is it these unofficial visits that are coming during March and April?
Yeah. Starting this week, there will be visitors making their way to Notre Dame to see spring practices. That'll be 2026 class, 2027 class.
And you've been amassing this list. I mean, are they getting the quality and quantity that you think would lend itself that Notre Dame is positioning itself well?
Yeah, no, I think there's lots of talent that's going to get to Notre Dame this spring. There's been it's a bit of I think it's been difficult for the recruiting department because the practice schedule has changed a few times. And they really want you to be here for a practice. Like they're not necessarily trying to get you on campus for just a random day in the although it's spring practice, it could be the winter still around here in South Bend, depending on the weather. So
depending on the day of the week.
Yeah. So I think at least if it's going to be
snowed yesterday and it's going to be high 60s in the middle of the week.
Yeah, and if it's going to be snowing, at least have them have some football to watch and see what that's like. So yeah, I mean, I think there's been some obstacles there in terms of lining things up, but there's no lack of interest in recruits who want to get to Notre Dame this spring, and a lot of guys are still working on finalizing those travel plans with Notre Dame having a few weeks of spring practice ahead of it. So, and then I think we talked about earlier the quarterback position in the 2027 class. Will we start to see some offers there? That's something that I want to keep an eye on as well.
Okay, so we've had all these tweets and reactions from Chad Bowden going to USC and USC trolling Notre Dame and all this stuff. So Chad Bowden used to be the GM at Notre Dame and had some recruiting roles before that. So is this whole thing overstated, or is there a reason for concern that Chad Bowden's move to USC is shifting the whole dynamic of recruiting, and Notre Dame better be worried and looking for the sky to fall?
I mean, I think there is a legit concern. But like I said earlier, like you can replace those guys. Like the ones that USC are winning now, you can go out and get better than them. Like they're not getting the best recruits. A lot of them are very good, but there are better guys out there. I think, like I mentioned earlier, like part of the reason that the lack of momentum has been there for Notre Dame is because it doesn't have the person that had so much influence on the recruits to begin with. And so that momentum had to be carried over. And then you lose Caleb Davis to San Diego State. So there was a lot of turnover within Zaire Turner went to USC. So there was a lot of turnover in the recruiting office where a lot of that momentum had to be held while this coaching staff was playing the playoff, and then the playoff gets over, and then those people who are keeping that momentum.
That was a good explanation, because a lot of people have never even heard those names that you said, but you explained it really well. So good job.
So yeah, I mean, USC is being bold and brash in its recruiting efforts and not afraid of poking at Notre Dame. I know like Notre Dame fans can rightly point to the scoreboard from November and for the last decade. But the recruiting battles are happening, and USC is winning them still, despite what has happened on the field. So either, like I said, find someone who is better than them that matters more to, or you just like USC is doing what it's doing despite not beating Notre Dame. And so I think that is something to be notable. And the reason it's most notable is because some of these guys are guys that Notre Dame has been recruited for a long time. There's a double legacy. Trent Mosley, both of his parents went to Notre Dame. He committed to USC. Braden Jones, who I talked about earlier, out of Chicago. He's a Rivals 100 defensive end. He's committed to USC. Samote Katawanga, who played with Madden Framo. Notre Dame thought it could land. He committed to USC. So Notre Dame's not going to stop recruiting a lot of the same players that USC recruits, and Notre Dame needs to win some of those battles, but it doesn't it's not like the board is okay. Everyone's either going to Notre Dame or USC. There's other teams out there too. And so I think USC is doing a good job right now. It has to do a lot more to sustain that, including winning games this season, probably. And Notre Dame has to do that too. But I think Notre Dame, USC is, I think, sort of taking shots, and intentionally so, at Notre Dame. Even if it's playing old clips of USC receivers against Notre Dame from before.
They should use AI and have the old receivers be going against the new Notre Dame defensive backs.
But the bottom line is it's working for USC right now. Is it a house of cards? We'll see. And I think it should be motivational to Notre Dame. Like, hey, we need to get our act together. We need to start winning some of these recruitments, or at least maybe fight back and flip one of those guys back to Notre Dame's
go toilet paper Chad Bowden's house. Here's my question. How do you think Marcus Freeman is processing this whole Chad Bowden thing?
I don't think he's panicking. I just think he's probably.
Do you think he's pissed at him? Do you think he thinks he's doing dirty pool? I mean, they were pretty close for a long time, Tyler.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think it's dirty pool. I mean, this is what Chad Bowden is being paid to do.
Yeah,
is recruit.
No, USC. But what does Marcus think? Does Marcus think it's dirty pool, or do you think Marcus is all fair and love and recruiting?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that's that. I think he knew, he knows Chad too well to think Chad's just going to go over there and let us have these guys that he's been recruiting for Notre Dame. He knows that Chad is competitive, and so. I don't think
he's
it's probably
super competitive. I mean, you've talked to him on the phone way more than I do. Just the little times I have, he was mad at his carrier that a call dropped between us, and he was thinking about going to a different carrier.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Marcus Freeman is like, man, he's really doing a good job out there, and we need to start figuring out what we need to do here. So I mean, I don't know I don't think he's going to get too worked up over USC trying to take shots on social media. And Notre Dame needs to come back with some social media shots. I mean, Ohio State took a shot at Notre Dame today as it relates to Pot of Gold Day and had a couple of guys, I think, stiff-arming Notre Dame players from the national championship with pots of gold in their hand. They said, "Happy Pot of Gold Day." I mean, that's Marcus's alma mater. This is how recruiting works. Yeah, and yours too. So you going to apologize on behalf of the Ohio State University?
No, that's kind of their brand. When I went to the first Fiesta Bowl where they were playing each other, I'm getting ready to go in, and there's a Ohio State fan and a Notre Dame fan arguing, and the Notre Dame fan's going, "You guys don't have high enough academic standards, blah, 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 blah." And the Ohio State fan goes, "Oh, yeah," and threw up on the Notre Dame fan. That's the on brand from my alma mater. I thought, okay, now I can go in the game. Okay, last question along these lines. What do Mike Martin's next moves need to be in light of all this? I mean, is it hiring more people? Is it strategic stuff? What does Mike Martin need to be focused on? Does he need to be mean to Chad?
I mean, filling out his staff, which I think is happening. And I think there's some movement that's been happening while we've been live here as it relates to a name that I'm aware of, but I have not been able to do any reporting as it relates to it while we're live on the show here. And make sure the recruiting staff is humming, be prepared for visitors, and then start evaluating the current roster and its needs. So I think he's got a lot of stuff to do and in a compressed timeline. And I don't think none of it can wait, right? Like all these things need to happen now. Like spring practice is going. You're going to have recruits walking into the IAC on Wednesday. You better be ready to put your best foot forward with those guys. And then also be ready to evaluate the guys that are hitting the practice field and start figuring out what your roster looks like going into next season.
Okay. We have not a lot of time left in the show. We haven't got to the Mike Martin stuff yet. Do you want to rapid fire through that and then plot our next move?
Sure.
I'll answer you some questions, but we're going to go quickly with these questions. Okay, how different speaking of Mike Martin, how different is his personality-wise and skill set from Chad Bowden?
Yeah, obviously he has much more experience in his evaluations rather than recruiting. I thought some of the recruiting stuff he did in the opening press conference was a little bit forced and maybe awkward when he asked a room of reporters, where else can you get the education and football that you can get at Notre Dame? And it's well, we're reporters, we're not fans. This is the wrong crowd to ask that to. And then he talked about Pot of Gold Day. But I do think, but beyond that, I think he's very impressive. I think he seems very likable and genuine. I don't know how well he relates to high school recruits, and that was something that Chad Bowden did really well with, and their parents as well.
One of the things you did in your analysis, you said he needs, we haven't learned yet what the full scope is of the people that he's going to surround himself, that he's continuing. So when do you think it's realistic for us to know where this whole operation is heading? I call it the front office. When's that realistic for us to learn that?
Wednesday when we talk to Marcus Freeman. I think Marcus Freeman should be prepared to answer those questions. Now, maybe he won't want to. And then we have to figure out, we have to go beyond that to do more digging and stuff.
No, that's good. I'm going to leave that up to you and doing it in a non-layered form. Okay, we're moving on now because we're doing these rapid fire.
All right.
Is Notre Dame moving at a quick enough pace, other than doing it during our show, with spring football starting this week? Are they moving along with the hiring process quick enough? Yeah,
I mean, what's happening behind the scenes and what's being reported can sometimes be different. So if they have guys that are ready to go for this week, even though they haven't been officially announced, then that's fine. But yeah, there are going to be people that are sort of learning on the job while they're also hosting recruits. And so I don't think that's ideal, but that's the situation that Notre Dame's in.
What do you make of Mike Martin's experience, all being in the NFL other than being a player at Vandy? And can that work in his favor, provided that he gets the people around him with that kind of experience?
Yeah, I mean, the NFL needs to be a big part of the recruiting pitch. That's what a lot of kids want to see when they're going through the college process is, how can I get to the NFL? And he can say he knows what that looks like. But meanwhile, that he has to have a staff that prepares him and works with him and making sure that Notre Dame's evaluating high schoolers the right way, and developing and connecting with them as it relates to relationships to make sure that they understand what's available for them at Notre Dame.
How adaptable do you think he can be when college football evolves again, maybe dramatically? And I asked him the question about moving the goalposts, and I want to see what you think. Did he give us a word salad, or do you feel pretty confident that he can pivot and adapt?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he outlined a lot of specifics for us. I don't know that it necessarily behooved
I don't know
him,
that he could.
that it behooved him to either. But he seems as someone that embraces that challenge. And if he couldn't do that, I don't think he would have been hired.
Right.
He's had different jobs and worked for different people. He seems pretty bright. So now Notre Dame has to continue to empower him and allow him to get the support he needs to execute everything at a high level here at Notre Dame.
Okay, we moved through that pretty quick. We delivered the Mike Martin promise. We have two things we can do. We can finish off with questions, or we can do the spring football questions.
I don't think we have. There's another. I mean, we've answered a lot of Scott Feeding questions. There is one more here if you want me to throw it in.
Why don't you throw that in, and then we'll do real quick. You can do me rapid fire with spring football.
All right. Steve Angeli really reminds me of Ian Book, which would be very good to have next year. But who does Carr remind you of? And he suggested Jimmy Clausen.
Not somebody that's played recently at Notre Dame that I've had my eyes on. He reminds me more of somebody that played football somewhere else that's playing in the NFL. I think he's a future NFL guy. I think he has that kind of talent. I don't know if he'll get there, the opportunity or the circumstances, but I love the way he's wired. I love his maturity. I mean, I talked to him as a high school senior, I went, whoa, why couldn't I have been this mature when I was 35? And his talent, and you talk to other people. I mean, Tyler, you remember when we were talking to Jack Swarbrick off the record, and he had some interesting things to say about CJ Carr, and there's a lot of other people that know football. So I don't know who he'd remind me of, and maybe that's a good thing because I think he could be special. That's why I'm picking him to win the job.
Yeah, I mean, I've covered Notre Dame since 2012, and I don't think there is someone that has been a quarterback at Notre Dame since 2012 that he compares to. Jimmy Clausen's before my time covering Notre Dame, so I don't have the same sort of reference point. But I don't know that I have someone from recent Notre Dame.
I'll say this about him versus Jimmy Clausen: he's way more mature and way less helicopter parent driven than Jimmy Clausen. That was a really different dynamic. Jimmy Clausen's dad wanted to go to the quarterback meetings, and Charlie told him no.
All right.
Okay. Do you want to do rapid fire football real quick? I'll try to go through these as fast as
I will rapid fire ask you these questions. This will be the first week of spring practices, and they won't be in pads for the first couple of days, so we don't get a lot of information here. But what do you think we should expect to learn about the quarterbacks in these first three practices?
I want to see who's out there on day one, how much work each of them get in our limited window. I don't expect to see a lot that's going to indicate to me who's number one, who will end up, but I'm curious to see deep passing, wide receiver chemistry, demeanor, etc.
I want to see who has the best haircut.
All right.
Beyond Marcus Freeman on Wednesday, all of our interview opportunities will be offensive oriented. So what are the most important things to learn beyond that, what we can observe on Wednesday?
Who's starting out at left tackle, and what do the other offensive line positions look like on day one? What are the expectations for Kevin Bauman at tight end? Impressions of Keedron Young, Jabron Payne, and Nolan James Jr. at running back, because they're battling for kind of the last spot in the rotation. I want to follow up on the blind spots conversation Jaywan Sider had, what he wanted the running backs to work on, who lines up and where at wide receiver, and how Marcus Freeman expects that to play out.
All right. And who are the 5 offensive players you're most interested in watching in week 1 beyond the quarterbacks?
again, some of the things that you referenced back, I think it was Scott's question early, why we look for things. So in that light, Kevin Bauman, Cam Williams, Charles Jagaza, Kedron Young, and Elijah Burris, they're players I need to know more about as I kind of try to form a bigger picture of the offense. They're not necessarily the best players at their position, although Charles Jagaza probably is, but they're interesting pieces to the puzzle.
I came up with 5 as well. I went with Gerby Lambert, Micah Gilbert, KK Smith, Cam Williams, and Kedron Young.
Those are great ones too, considering some of them were on my paper. Okay.
All right. Who are your 5 defensive players you're most interested in week
Boy,
one?
this was defensive line heavy. I went with Jared Dawson, Jason Anye, Elijah Hughes, Jadon Blair at safety, and Jalen Sneed at linebacker.
All right. I went with Onye and Dawson as well. I went safeties, Luke Talich and Tay Johnson. And then Devontae Smith. Is he going to be a stud at nickelback? I'm curious what the first impression of him is.
All right. I think we answered it all.
We did it. We made it through.
Okay.
Like I mentioned at the top of the show, you can subscribe now for a free trial of InsideNDSports.com using promo code GoldDay25. Smiley faces are optional. GoldDay25 will get you a free trial that lasts you until the summer. You have to sign up by the end of Tuesday to do that. So if you are interested in getting access to all of our premium content from now until summer, now's the chance to do that without having to pay a nickel. We'd appreciate you jump on board. We'll have plenty of insight in terms of recruiting, premium analysis with the football program, and obviously Eric's going to be covering the women's basketball program. So plenty of stuff ahead for us.
No live chat this week, though, but if you want to ask football questions or women's basketball questions, we have a special women's basketball player guest tomorrow on the podcast. So submit those either on the Insider Lounge if you're a subscriber. If you're not, on X, where I said submit questions, just follow the instructions.
All right. Have a good week.